The galaxy thought they had us figured out. Primitive, isolated, harmless. But today, they saw something that made even the Empire panic. Because when that ship appeared, massive, silent, and unregistered, no one believed it could belong to Earth. And yet, it did. What they saw next changed everything. If you're new to the channel, welcome to HFY Aliens Battle, where humans don't just survive, we surprise the stars. Subscribe now and join us for more stories where humanity rewrites the rules of the galaxy. The outer rim of Galactic Sector 12 was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of silence you only get when all the troublemakers have either been vaporized, relocated, or bought off. The Empire liked it that way. This stretch of stars had been pacified long ago. Mining colonies hummed without protest. Supply routes ticked along like clockwork. No anomalies, no dramas. It was, by all measures, a dead-end corner of space, which is why the patrol ship Vrexal 9 didn't even sound an alarm when it detected an unknown vessel near the outer boundary grid. Just a blip. One more speck in the endless. Dark Lieutenant Carrick glanced at the scan, frowned, and rubbed at his neck ridges. He flagged the anomaly for inspection and leaned back in his chair. The automated diagnostics would take 30 seconds. He didn't expect anything exciting. A stray transport maybe, a lost drone, another one of those half-patched salvage freighters humans kept floating around. Still, the signal was odd. No transponder, no motion beacon, no digital signature at all. Just a long, sleek shape drifting at sublight, not cloaked, not jammed, just quiet. The AI chimed a low tone. Analysis complete. Carrick leaned in. Mass, 3.2 million tons. Length, over 5 kilometers. Hull composition, unknown composite. Energy signature, minimal, non-standard. Drive configuration, not in databanks. He blinked. That wasn't a stray. That was a capital-class vessel, except it didn't belong to anyone. No flags, no registry, no known build origin. Carrick called it in. Command didn't react much at first. These things happened. Old tech from extinct races sometimes drifted in from beyond the charted void. But even as the first team of remote scanners were dispatched, something began to feel off because the closer they looked, the stranger it got. No external weapon systems visible, no crew signals, no heat trails, no emissions, no conventional propulsion wake. And yet, it was moving, steady, purposeful, right through one of the Empire's most tightly monitored sectors. Other officers began to take notice. One called it a ghost ship. Another joked, maybe the humans finally built something decent. No one laughed, because by the second hour, every sensor on the patrol net had eyes on it, and no one could explain what they were seeing. It wasn't drifting like wreckage. It wasn't maneuvering like a ship. It was just moving forward, unbothered, as if it belonged there, as if nothing could stop it. They launched a long-range probe, fast, small, nearly invisible. It got close, then vanished. No explosion, no debris, no feedback. Just gone. That's when the tension shifted from curiosity to concern, because the Empire prided itself on control. There was a protocol for everything, even unidentified alien vessels. But this didn't fit, and deep in command among the ranks of officers too old to joke and too smart to panic, a quiet realization settled in. This wasn't just a strange ship. This was something else, something new. And it came from a world the Empire hadn't paid much attention to in years. Earth. A human signature, faint but present, was finally detected in the vessel's data emissions. Barely a whisper. Old-style code. Primitive, almost analog, but unmistakable. The command deck fell into stunned silence when the signal was confirmed. "That's a Terran vessel," someone said quietly. "No," came the reply. "Humans don't have ships like that." But they did, because one had just arrived, and no one knew what it meant. By hour 4, the chatter across command channels had shifted. No one was joking anymore. The unidentified ship still hadn't slowed, still hadn't responded, still hadn't fired a single shot or shown the faintest sign of aggression. And yet, the Empire's military intelligence wing was now on full alert. They had a name for these things. Category Red Echo. A contact that appears non-hostile, but whose nature, origin, or function defies all classification. They were rare. One every few centuries. But this one was worse. Because it had a source, Earth, not confirmed by declaration, but by a mission signature, an unmistakable Terran encryption fragment buried deep in the power modulation field. Human-made, not outsourced, not borrowed, built, and it was massive. The Vrexall 9's captain, a hardened Zalek officer with 2 decades of calm under fire, stood in silence as the latest deep scan results fed through the bridge holotable. The ship was 5 times longer than any vessel ever known to leave Earth. Its hull didn't register as any known alloy. It reflected scans in non-linear patterns, as if the material itself was deciding what to reveal. And the worst part, its drive system wasn't using standard fusion, ion, or slipstream mechanics. It moved with almost no signature. No radiation bloom. No EM interference, no gravitic wake, just steady forward momentum. That's impossible, one tech whispered, but the data kept confirming itself. Engineers cross-referenced everything against the Imperial database. Over 2 million ships cataloged, every known species, every fringe variation. Nothing matched. Someone finally said it aloud. This ship shouldn't exist. They tried to contact Earth. Standard diplomatic channels, military subspace relays, even civilian beacon frequencies. No reply, no denial, no warning, just silence. A growing, confident silence. That terrified the admirals more than any weapon, because when a backwater species builds something this advanced and doesn't brag about it, that means they're not showing off. They're testing. And this ship wasn't in the middle of a test range. It was deep in Empire territory, on purpose. The Council of 5, ancient and rarely unanimous, convened an emergency session. Most of the session was redacted before it could leak, but a single line made it into the lower intelligence briefings. If the humans built this, they didn't build it to impress us. They built it because they no longer care what we think. That line unsettled more than any scan. Because everyone knew Earth's history. They were ambitious, yes, loud, chaotic, but they'd always been visible. Their fleets, their science, their exploration efforts. Everything was public, proud, which meant this ship, this shadow-gliding, code-silent, physics-bending construct, was something else entirely. A secret, and no one knew how many more there were or how long. Earth had been hiding them. In one system, 2 Imperial captains argued over whether to engage it. One argued protocol, unknown contact, no comms, too close to restricted space. The other simply shook his head. You can attack it if you want, he said, but I'm not staying to watch. And just like that, half the patrol ships quietly broke formation. No orders, no panic, just instinct. Because every officer with real experience felt the same chill. This wasn't a standoff. It was a message. Earth had never asked to sit at the top table. But now, they were pulling up their own chair, and the rest of the galaxy had no idea what they were bringing with them. By the next rotation, the term anomaly vessel had been retired. It was now officially designated Object T-01. The T didn't stand for Terran, not publicly, but everyone in intelligence knew what it meant. The conversation at High Command was no longer about what the ship was. It was about who had built it, and no one wanted to believe the answer. Earth. It didn't make sense. Humanity was known, cataloged, predictable. Their military tech was rugged, affordable, and just advanced enough to make them useful in minor coalitions. They had a reputation for being stubborn, sure. Creative, yes, but dangerous, no. They had colonies, but none of them were serious players. Their largest warships, while respectable, were nowhere near the top 10 in mass or firepower. Their slipspace. Tech was second-hand, borrowed from old trade treaties. And yet, this ship, this thing, was breaking every assumption. The data came in wave after wave. It was fast, but not because it had better engines. It didn't use engines, not in the traditional sense. Its movement seemed to come from space itself warping around it, a technique theorized in fringe science circles but deemed impossible due to energy demands and stability risks. But the Terran ship didn't stutter, didn't strain. It glided, smoothly, and not just that. Its presence was affecting nearby ships. Sensors began returning warped results. Imperial patrol craft reported sudden calibration drift. AI nav cores started generating phantom coordinates. Hull temps dropped without explanation. One vessel reported onboard time discrepancies of nearly 2 seconds after passing within range of T-01's wake. That wasn't just stealth. That was field control, the kind of tech that should take thousands of years to develop, not a few decades of Terran tinkering. And still, no response from Earth. The Empire sent a full diplomatic packet. Class 7 urgency, confirmed delivery. No reply, nothing. But the ship itself, hovering near the outer line of controlled space, not pushing, not hiding, just waiting. A veteran fleet marshal made the statement others were too afraid to say out loud. "That's not a human ship," he said. But he wasn't denying its origin. He was denying its familiarity. Because if Earth built that, then humanity wasn't the species the galaxy thought it was. They hadn't just advanced. They had evolved, quietly, privately, strategically. It was the silence that scared them most. No threats, no broadcasts, no warnings. Just a vessel so advanced it broke sensors, and a planet that refused to explain. Some suggested it was a stolen prototype. Others blamed rogue AI. A few whispered about Earth forging alliances with ancient precursor tech, buried far beyond the rim. But every theory was worse than the last because they all implied the same thing. Humanity had access to something new, and no one else did. And that meant balance. The balance that had kept empires secure for centuries was gone. It hadn't fallen. It had been outgrown. By the very species they once called harmless. By the planet they thought they could monitor and manage. The Admiralty finally issued an internal statement. Do not engage Object T-01. Observe only. Report any new behavior. Avoid provocation. But beneath those orders, every officer understood the truth. This wasn't about defense anymore, it was about adapting, because the humans weren't just arriving late to the galactic stage, they were walking on with something no one else could match. And behind that one silent ship, there might be more. They called it a signal, but it wasn't. Not in the way the Empire understood communication. No words, no language, no code, just a pulse. It came without warning. A soft, low-frequency wave that rolled across space like a ripple in still water. No damage, no alarms, no sound, but every ship within 100,000 kilometers felt it. Felt, not heard. That was the first sign that something was wrong, because ships aren't supposed to feel. And yet sensor data wasn't what reported the event. It was the crews, commanders, engineers, bridge officers. They all described the same thing, a sensation, a pressure behind the eyes, a brief spike of static along skin, a low, unshakable hum deep in the chest cavity. It passed in seconds, but it left something behind. Not fear, not aggression, just change. Shipboard systems reconfigured themselves, not visibly, not all at once, but subtly. Navigation paths recalculated. Environmental controls adjusted without crew input. Diagnostic subroutines flagged nothing, yet processes ran smoother. A communications officer aboard the Elathrix flagship described it best. It's like our ship just learned something. Fleet Command scrambled to isolate the event. They called it a field anomaly. They said the human ship had deployed a passive scan disruptor, some kind of stealth tech they hadn't encountered before. But the techs disagreed because this wasn't stealth, it wasn't interference, it was integration. Whatever the ship had sent out, it wasn't trying to hide. It was trying to understand. And the more time ships spent near it, the more their systems adjusted, subtly. Not corrupted, not hacked, just too improved. Artificial gravity stabilized. Power flows became more efficient. Bandwidth smoothed across nodes. It was as if the Terran ship was teaching, not by force, by proximity. And yet, when they tried to initiate direct communication, nothing. No return message, no visual link, just the same steady presence. That was when they sent a scout ship closer. No weapons, minimal crew, just sensors and a brave pilot. It approached within visual range. The report it sent back nearly shorted out Imperial command traffic for an hour. The Terran ship had no visible engine banks, no hangar bays, no bridge tower, just a smooth, endless surface, angled strangely, like geometry that bent light in ways the eye didn't like. But when the scout circled to the ship's port side, it caught something, a symbol, one that matched no current Terran military or government emblem, just a circle, plain empty, perfect, as if to say, we are whole. We don't need to speak. And then, the scout system shut down, gently. No EMP, no aggression. Every console flickered. Every engine cycled to zero. Every weapon unarmed. And in the final seconds before the data stream went silent, the pilot spoke a single line, voice calm and clear. They don't want to talk. They want us to listen. That message echoed through military networks like thunder in a tomb, because listening was not what the Empire did. The Empire spoke, declared, commanded. But now, in the presence of a ship that rewrote physics by simply existing, they were the ones being taught. And Earth still hadn't sent a word. That terrified them more than any threat, because it meant this wasn't a warning. This was a reality, and the galaxy had just stepped into it. Panic in the Empire didn't look like screaming. It looked like meetings, thousands of them, emergency sessions, closed-door briefings, advisory councils with old names and older grudges. The ship had not attacked. It had not moved aggressively. It had not even responded to hails. But it had already shaken the most powerful empire in the known galaxy to its core. Not because of violence, because of uncertainty. Every major system in the empire logged the pulse, civilian and military alike. And what followed were quiet reports from across star sectors. Ships ran more efficiently. Some communications lag disappeared. Atmospheric controls improved overnight. On the surface, that sounded good. But the implications? Uncontrollable. Because it meant the ship wasn't just watching. It was touching, and doing it without permission. No infiltration, no viruses, just improvement. Imperial Command theorized at first that it might be some kind of demonstration, that the Terran vessel was showing off a capability, but that theory unraveled quickly when they realized the humans hadn't said a word. This wasn't posturing. This was behavior, and behavior meant intent. But the intent was unreadable. They couldn't match it to any known doctrine, species, or strategy. It wasn't threat display. It wasn't alliance outreach. It wasn't even espionage. It was presence, pure and simple. A presence so advanced it changed your ship without asking. And that made it the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. One by one, Empire officers began pulling ships back from the perimeter. Some cited tactical redistribution. Others quietly turned off transponders and drifted to safer zones. No one wanted to be the first to provoke it, or the first to disappear. The High Council issued an encrypted directive. If the ship moved, do not engage, observe, record, and retreat. If approached. Behind the scenes, panic spiraled. Border governors called for naval reinforcements. Science divisions pleaded for access to study the vessel. Security agencies accused one another of suppressing Terran technological development in previous decades, and through it all, Earth said nothing. No apology, no justification, just that quiet, impossible ship hovering like a question the Empire didn't want to answer. Then the unthinkable happened. A private sector defense contractor, frustrated by the Empire's indecision, launched an unauthorized stealth drone toward the vessel. Small, fast, invisible. It never reached visual range. Every sensor tracking it simply lost contact. No explosion, no debris, just gone. Gone like the first probe. Gone without trace. But this time, something changed. The ship moved, only slightly. A course, correction, barely measurable. But it was enough to send alarms across a dozen systems, because the direction it turned, it was headed closer to Empire space. And still it didn't speak. Still it didn't fire. Still it didn't slow. Fleet marshals convened under red light protocols. For the first time in a generation, the Empire raised its silent defense grid, a planetary shield network so expensive and secret that even most civilians didn't know it existed. Trade halted. Ships rerouted. Wormholes collapsed under maintenance advisories. And across the core worlds, families felt it. That invisible weight in the air. That tension that comes not before the storm, but when you realize the storm has already arrived, and it doesn't need thunder to prove its power. All from one ship, built by one species. The one species no one had expected. The one species the Empire had filed under interesting but irrelevant humans, and now those same humans were at the center of every military briefing, every broadcast, every whispered conversation in every hall of power. Because if this was what they were capable of in silence, what would they do when they decided to speak? It didn't happen all at once. Panic never does. It starts with doubt, with the silence between words, with nervous glances passed across control rooms, with reports that don't add up and systems that behave too perfectly. Then it spreads. 1. Empire ship quietly retreats from its patrol zone, citing sensor interference. Another fails to report in, its crew choosing to go dark rather than hover near something they no longer understand. And at the center of it all, Object T-01 continued to glide silently along the outer perimeter of the Empire's sovereign space. Doing nothing, saying nothing, just being there. That, more than anything, was the threat. Because ships don't just move without thrust. They don't emit gravitational warps without collapsing. They don't broadcast stability, but this one did. Every minute it remained visible. Every rotation it remained unbothered. Every fleet it passed without even blinking was a message. And the Council finally got it. They called an emergency session. Not in the public chamber, but deep in the black vaults of Corval. No recordings, no aides, just decision-makers. The same ones who had once dismissed Earth as a mildly irritating adolescent civilization with too many colonies and not enough caution. They reviewed the data, all of it, and one of them, the old Nathari Chancellor who had authored the first Galactic Non-Intervention Protocol, said quietly, "We made a mistake. We watched the humans, but we never understood them. We assumed they were behind us, but maybe they were beneath us, waiting." The room went silent. Then someone asked the most dangerous question. How many ships like this do they have? There was no answer. Not because no one knew, but because the implications of knowing were worse than the comfort of speculation. If Earth had built one in secret, they could have built 10. If they had built 10, they could have built a fleet. And if they had a fleet with ships like this, there would be no way to stop them. Not with weapons. Not with politics. Not with anything the Empire had ever planned for. The Council voted, not unanimously, but close. A full military escalation review was ordered. They started pulling fleets from low-threat zones. They authorized defensive posturing along the Earth corridor. And quietly, very quietly, they began drawing up scenarios labeled HTR, Human Technological Reversal, which was a polite way of saying, if they don't listen to us, can we stop them? But deep down they already knew the answer. No, because if you had to ask that question, you'd already lost. Alliances began to shift. The Zarnak theocracy, once loyal lapdogs of the Empire, issued a spiritual declaration of neutrality, citing divine unease. The Vrel Syndicate, always pragmatic, opened quiet diplomatic channels with Earth's outer colonies, and independent systems, long held in check by the balance of power, began preparing for something they couldn't quite name, but knew was coming change. The kind of change you don't vote on. The kind that arrives silently, wrapped in an impossible hull, gliding across the stars like it owns them. And still, Earth said nothing. No threats, no demands, no ultimatum, just one ship, one impossible ship, and a galaxy now wondering whether their greatest mistake was thinking humans needed to be warned. Because it turned out the humans had been waiting. And now it was the Empire's turn to listen. By now, the Empire had stopped pretending everything was under control. T-01, what was once just an anomaly, had become a quiet symbol of everything they couldn't explain. It had moved further into Empire-monitored space, not by force, but by indifference. Patrol routes were cleared ahead of it. Surveillance nets redirected. Even pirates had started giving it a wide berth. But the curiosity hadn't vanished. If anything, it had grown more desperate. The Council, now fractured, behind its polished diplomacy, authorized one final attempt at understanding the vessel. Not an attack, no one dared that, but an intrusion. They sent in a stealth drone, built in silence. Black hull, disassembled in orbit and reassembled inside a mining shell. It carried no weapons, no signature, just a single mission. Get close, get inside if possible, transmit everything. It launched silently from a relay station hidden in the rings of Drixar 4, took a meandering, seemingly random path, mimicked civilian drift, never once used active propulsion, drifted with asteroids, disguised its emissions as background radiation. It worked. T-001 made no movement. The drone reached scanning range, then visual range, then contact range, and then entry. No doors opened, no hangars lit up, no force fields shimmered. The ship simply let it in, like a rock falling into a pond. No ripples, no friction, just one object passing into another. The drone sent back 3 seconds of footage. 3 seconds that broke every sensor, shattered every AI analysis model, and sent dozens of officers into medical stasis for neural stabilization. The feed showed no crew, no bridge, no control panels, just space. But not empty space. Living space. Shifting walls that moved like breath. Glowing veins of light that pulsed in rhythm with the drone's own energy output. Every surface seemed to be responding, not defending, not attacking, just observing. And then came the shape. It wasn't human. And it wasn't not human either. Just something tall, luminous, fluid, formed from strands of light and metal and memory. And it looked directly at the drone. There were no eyes. But the stare was real. And in that instant, every feed went dark. The drone didn't explode. It simply ceased. Its energy signature didn't vanish. It was absorbed. Its data logs weren't erased. They were blank, as if they'd never been filled. Its presence didn't fade. It was unwritten. And for one long moment afterward, T-01 stopped moving. Only then did Earth speak. One message, 5 words, no fanfare, no modulation, just a plain human voice through every open channel. Do not send. Things inside. And then, silence. But it was a different silence. The kind that comes after thunder, because those 5 words did more than warn. They confirmed. Earth had heard everything, seen everything, allowed everything. And they still weren't angry. They were just asking for manners. That realization hit harder than any weapon, because it meant humanity hadn't built T-01 to dominate. They had built it to exist, and that kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself, is the most dangerous kind. Of all empires scramble to defend against what they understand. But how do you prepare for a species that builds ships you can walk into like a dream? How do you match forces with a people who whisper rather than shout? And how do you survive a future where you're not the center anymore? That was the question the council faced now, and for the first time in millennia, they didn't have an answer. The message echoed for days. Do not send things inside. No threat, no force, no demand. Just a boundary, a line drawn, not in hostility, but in quiet certainty. And with that, Earth went silent again. Across the Empire, transmission traffic surged. Diplomats requested clarification. High Command sent encrypted packets. Science divisions offered trade, cooperation, even apology. There was no response. T-01 remained in motion, unchanged, untouchable, and unmoved. The Empire had sent war fleets to subjugate lesser civilizations with less provocation than this. Yet now, with their pride bruised and their intelligence shattered, they hesitated. Because no one wanted to be the first to force Earth's hand. They didn't know what that would look like. And what's worse, Earth didn't seem interested in clarifying it. Across the core worlds, news anchors asked the same question in every language, every tone, every format. What does Earth want? And they got the same answer every time. Nothing. No territory, no negotiation, no requests, and that was the problem. Because if a power wants something, you can reason with it. If it wants nothing, you can't control it. Earth had become unpredictable, not because it was chaotic, but because it was indifferent. And nothing frightens empires more than a force that doesn't need them. That's when the outer colonies started whispering, not the Terran colonies, others, smaller worlds, marginalized species, formerly exploited zones that had been left to rot by imperial bureaucracy. They saw the footage, the ship, the silence, and they understood something the Empire refused to see. Earth isn't flexing, Earth is free, and that idea, simple as it was, spread. What if Earth had stopped playing the game? What if, while the Council debated borders and tariffs and prestige, Earth had been building something else? Not empires, not fleets, but possibilities. That's when the strange signals began. Low-frequency pings across deep space arrays, Terran signature, but not from official channels, simple phrases. We are not expanding. We are watching. Let life grow. They weren't addressed to the Empire, they weren't addressed to anyone, just there. Like markers left on a trail the rest of the galaxy didn't know existed. The Empire tried to interpret them. Disinformation, psychological tactics, encoded threats. None of it fit. Because the more they watched, the clearer it became. Earth had no interest in control, not over space, not over politics. Not even over perception. They let the galaxy wonder, let the speculation swirl. Because when a civilization stops asking to be noticed and starts making itself impossible to ignore, there's no point in talking. You've already spoken. And so, Earth didn't reply because they didn't have to. Their ship was already there, floating, watching. And in that silence, the galaxy heard something louder than any broadcast. Earth had changed. And they didn't care who noticed.